This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Monday.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon for Jamie. Welcome back, Jamie Lane. How we doing? How's Barcelona? I'm jealous of your weather right now.
Well, it's a little bit cooler than expected. Also got to the office this morning and Wi-Fi's out and the water's out. So I'm on a hotspot and having to walk across the street to the coffee shop to use the restroom. So it's great here in Barcelona.
My Wi-Fi also went down about 10 minutes before we started. So we're both in a similar boat this morning.
Wow.
We got two hot spots.
Traveling sounds terrible. Why not just stay at home?
Yeah.
What time's dinner tonight, Jamie? Like 10, 11?
Yeah, we've got 9:30 reservations.
That's so disgusting.
Gosh, it's horrible.
It works out though because I have meetings till like 9 because I didn't fix my calendar from East Coast to Europe.
That's brutal. That's also brutal. I've done that on a trip once, and I was like, "Ooh, I regret every decision I've made leading up to this point." So good. Well, happy Monday. Welcome back, Jamie. You were also pretty busy, not just with this travel, but I believe you were at the Hunter Hotel Conference last week or so. Catch us up. What's been new in your world?
So got to speak on stage at the Hunter Hotel Investment Conference with our friends from STR, which is always confusing. They're the hotel data provider, CBRE and Calorie Labs. So definitely have some interesting data to share with you guys about that. But in general, it was like 2,500 hotel investor operators at the conference. We had the CFO of Hilton there. You had some of the really big players in the hotel investment space, and a lot of caution. A lot of people that I think were really excited going to 2025 that this year was going to be a great year for hospitality, a great year for new investment. And then we're in this sort of period where, and everyone I talked to was just like, all right, pencils down. We got to wait. We got to see what's going to shake out in terms of tariffs, what's going to shake out in terms of the economy. And it's really an entirely different start to 2025 than most people were expecting and I think hoping for.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think there's a general sentiment of buckle up, wait and see. And you have some really interesting data that I'm excited to go through later on in the show.
Yeah, and it's 100%. Heavily bifurcated between classifications as well, isn't it?
It is on the hotel data side, upper upscale luxury doing really well, which is primarily your typical business travelers or corporate business. And then group, big conferences doing really well, growing very strongly, still not entirely recovered from COVID, but they've still have a strong sort of growth rate trajectory, and it's really driving the growth there. And then where all the weakness is on the leisure side, especially sort of the lower end leisure traveler is just really hurting. The hotel industry did see a really strong pickup in bookings because of the hurricane. Hurricane Helene and whatever that other hurricane was, as well as LA fires, have driven significant bookings for displaced residents. But and outside of that, there's not a whole lot of sort of positive things to say coming out of the conference.
Yeah. So the being in the upper upscale and luxury is definitely going to be the safer zone. It always has been, no matter where you are in an economic cycle. Wealthy people always travel. I think you mentioned the groups. It hasn't recovered to 2019 levels, but it's almost there, right? It was, if I remember correctly, 98% of it. So it's basically apples to apples. I know economists, 2% is a lot, but to me, it's about the same. And then one of the most interesting data points that I saw was U.S. lodging recovery relative to 2019, where short-term rentals is up like 31% and cruise lines are up almost 30%. And you've got total hotel room nights down 1.5% or so. So it's not that necessarily short-term rentals are eating into hotels, but they're eating the growth of hotels, it seems. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. And when you look, and you can just start looking at supply, like typical hotel supply growth is almost 2% a year. Since 2019, we've averaged less than 0.5% growth a year. All the while, we have almost 30% more short-term rental listings from that same period. And when you look at where travel is going, it's really going in the direction of like where short-term rentals are adding supply. So all the sort of incremental growth the U.S. has seen in travel has essentially gone to short-term rentals and cruises and not to hotels. And then even look at where hotel growth is strong now, and it's almost entirely in the top 25 cities, even top 50 cities. And that's where demand's growing 25% and 2.5%. And you look at short-term rentals, like it's down and flat to down in terms of overall demand. So my theme when I was up on stage was like where hotels are winning. They're doing well, essentially in urban areas, but where short-term rentals are winning, they're sort of doubling down, sort of non-urban, large homes, and that's clearly what we see. And one of the stats I love is when you look at overall demand, treating each short-term rental listing as like one night, demand's up like 31% compared to pre-COVID levels. If you treat each demand as a night sold as each room, like it's up like 37, 38% compared to 2019, because you've seen so much more demand of the larger listings. And those type of markets are where short-term rentals are really stealing supply, is where for the average leisure traveler, they want to travel with their family, they want to travel with a group. And that's where you see the strongest demand, both in 2024 and 2025, but also compared to pre-COVID.
So do you think that's a trend, or do you think part of that's a function of demand following supply? So if hotel supply has grown by 25% of what it should have or what it had in the decade previous, are people just not going to where those properties would have been and going into short-term rentals? Or is this a lasting trend? And maybe I won't even call it short-term rentals, but out of cities and into more into nature.
Yeah, and that is clearly the trend, that demand's gone and continues to go. And short-term rental are adding supply in those areas. And that continues. And you add supply, the demand continues to go to it, and occupancy levels maintain, you add more supply. And we're still seeing 15+% growth in small and mid-sized cities on the demand side in the US. Like overall demand is only growing at like 5%. So we're still seeing massive growth. And like one of my other favorite stats is when you look at Airbnb's business, like 2015, 2016, their urban sort of business was 8x that of small and mid-sized cities. Now it's even. So the business and the demand of people just booking through short-term rental through Airbnb and booking short-term rentals is just totally changed.
Yeah, well, and it's also interesting the comment about like the stagnation kind of hotel growth, because that makes a lot more sense. You know, building large single family homes is a way different game than building, you know, a large hotel that requires, you know, different type of like land purchase, construction financing, all of that kind of stuff. So, and unfortunately for the hotels, I don't really see that easing up anytime soon.
No,
We'll
and that was the other sort of that that was the other big factor that everyone was talking about, is just the pains on labor. And labor costs are going up, profit margins are shrinking, and the expectation with the and of a lack of new immigration, or at least over the next few years, that's going to really put a further impact labor costs in a negative way for operators.
Yeah, I mean, as like anyone listening, anyone that's an operator knows, like being in the business of labor management is already a tricky feat. So it'll be like everybody else at your conference, just like buckle up, see what happens.
Yeah, and then if I could share, and since we're already digging into it, like a couple more data points and of just like the worries out there, like, and we're all in a little bit uncertainty. And the one thing that Calibri shared that I just find is fascinating, because they break out the channels that people book through for hotels. So they see for the US, 4% of all bookings are people booking government travel, like actually going through and using the codes that it's for government travel. So, and they track forward bookings. And for the next 30 days, demand is down 80%.
Wow.
So you think about 4% of demand, and that's down 80%. Like that could be a very big headwind. And the administration has already come out talking about how, like, essentially, if you want to do any government travel, like you've got to have like really strong justification, to be able to do it. So that's going to be a pretty strong headwind. And we're already seeing it in the data, travel coming out of Canada into the US. So for short-term rentals, international demand is about 11%, which is pretty strong. And of total US demand, Canadian stays or Canadian travelers make up about 2.5%, which is sizable. But then you've got some markets like Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Maui, Adirondacks, even Fort Lauderdale, anywhere from like 7 to 12% of that market's demand comes from Canadian travelers. And we're already,
That's actually, so my like family is super ingrained in the Adirondack community and in upstate New York. And it's like crushing some of those towns that rely very heavily, like even more than those percentages, on people that have their second homes or that always just make quick trips across the border. And so it's really interesting. I think getting in like a macro level, you can see that there's certain places that are definitely feeling that a bit more, you know, like Fort Lauderdale, they're going to see some dips, but you also just had like Miami spring break, like shifted to Fort Lauderdale. So they're making up the ground in other places.
Yeah, I would venture to guess. I mean, that goes back to the top of the discussion, the bifurcation between high end and not high end. Now he's not going to see any dip from Canadians. The rich are going to get on their private planes and fly to their Maui home. And then same if they're getting on a plane down to Florida or whatever. But yeah, northern New York and Maine and all of that, the drive to markets from Canada, I could see being affected. And I want to get back to that data. So the luxury and upper scale the hotel demand is up, combined about 14%. But economy and independence and mid-scale is down about 5%. So it's not that it's, just outpacing it. It's that it is actually going negative in a real manner. I know I said 2% earlier is not a big number, but it is in this case.
Yeah, and what's even more enlightening is something that Jan Freitag at STRs sort of did up on stage was show the breakout of growth. And you sort of like overall, like, January and February demand was up 1.5%. But then when you take out the hurricane impacted markets, you take out LA, you take out some of the other sort of top 25 really high growth areas, like typical market demand was only up 0.2%. So like that's our starting point now in terms of overall sort of hotel growth. And then a little bit more headwinds on the government and inbound international traveler. Like it's not hard to paint a picture where hotel demand could meaningfully turn negative this year.
Well, historically, when national dives, domestic jumps. Are we seeing that as well?
So far, no. And a big piece of that is like how strong the dollar is. So the dollar is still making it very attractive to travel to Europe. And I can say, and dollar's going very far right now. So there's still a question as we head into summer travel season is, do Americans sort of stay domestic, not travel overseas? Maybe I'm worried about an international pushback. I heard some people talking at the conference. They're like, I went to Greece the past couple of years, but now I'm going to stay domestic to sort of support the U.S. Travel industry. So will we see that? I think yet to be seen. And generally what I've seen is like the dollar matters more than anything else. And if Europe stays on sale, we're going to continue to see people doing those international trips.
Yeah. So kind of in that same vein, not right now, but maybe once like as the year progresses, the people that, maybe would have flown to a destination, do you see that it's possible that people will now switch to drive to markets? So like the lower budget traveler might still stay home, but then some of that demand might get taken up by people that normally might take a bigger trip, but are just kind of scaling down the trip.
Yeah, that's what we might see if we do go into a real recession. Like, and there's the concern out there around a recession, but it's still like the chance of recession has gone from like 15% maybe at the end of last year up to like 30%. So baseline scenario, I'm forecasting, I think most economists are still forecasting, is that we ride through this, we don't go into recession, there's no major pullback in consumer spending, and we're going to sort of ride these tariffs, ride the changes that are happening, but that we're still going to get through it, and that we have enough tailwinds in the overall economy and we're not going to see real pullback from consumers. But to your point, Brandy, if we do see that, we do go into a recession, that can really shift the winners and losers of drive to markets around major metros, and can definitely steal share of demand for people that maybe were taking a bigger trip overseas or flying somewhere.
So go to Positano now.
Yeah. I was going to say, where one thing goes away, something else usually fills its place. So I think it's going to be kind of like what Michael said. When international is not as popular, domestic is. When domestic's popular, it takes away from international, like vice versa. Something will fill its place. I'm not too worried about it. And I think leads into a good story where we get to cover some real drama happening between the big OTAs. This is quite the fun story we got to share inside of our group chat when Brian Chesky posted on his Instagram story with a funny little GIF emoji on it. But Vrbo and Airbnb are fighting once again publicly, as Vrbo is putting these type of billboards and campaigns across multiple cities in the U.S., basically saying that they're better than Airbnb, but giving Airbnb a ton of free marketing at the same time. So where's your guys' thoughts on all of this in terms of the big OTAs?
Airbnb's market share, we covered this last week, has grown very significantly over the past 5 or so years. Vrbo's is pretty much flat, I think down 2% to keep coming back to that number. And I guess the rest of the market is losing in the way of direct bookings and whatnot. But I think Vrbo's leaning into the right things, and I also think Airbnb is getting free marketing again. So 2 things can be true at once. Using the Airbnb name in the marketing is only free marketing for Airbnb, especially now that it's become a news story in the Wall Street Journal and all of the industry publications, but it's become a mainstream story. But I also think it's smart for Vrbo to lean into what's theirs, which is a higher end, more consistent product in a destination market, more family focused. I think, and there's one more story I want to cover in a minute that goes to standards and getting up to a certain level of consistency. But I think that's where Vrbo has to focus, is on being the premium brand within the space, and Airbnb is the mass market brand. Airbnb's fantastic at marketing, especially getting free stories like this. But Vrbo, I think, is smart for leaning into the messaging that they are a more premium brand.
Except everybody's product is everywhere. Well, for the most part. But I agree. Like the messaging can't. The first thing when I saw this, I was like, the girls are fighting. And it just seems like they're trying to copy this, like the cool kind of social media marketing strategy that like Wendy's has. That's like the really famous example where Wendy's Twitter or X account just like trolls everyone. And it just doesn't totally come off that way. But I think that Airbnb like revels in these moments when they get like, all this, they take advantage of any single type of PR. This is just great for them. But with Vrbo, to continue to lean into being like the premium product, I still think that there is a ways to go. Like that it should be the direction they go in. But like in terms of the back end support and the back end technology, and from like the host perspective, I think that has to improve. And from the guest, like they have kind of like all the building blocks to become like that OTA, that premium OTA. And it just seems like they're not executing quickly enough. But I guess we'll see in another year once they've like fully, taken care of their tech debt and all that stuff. But it just seems like it's kind of happening a little bit more slowly than I would think.
Yeah. And I think I've made this comment before, but I'm going to double down on it. 9 out of 10 nights sold are still in a hotel. Like for Vrbo to be going after Airbnb, I feel like they're missing the opportunity of actually going after, like, how is Vrbo going to grow share? How are they going to grow bookings? It's stealing demand away from hotels. It's not stealing demand away from Airbnb. So you look at Airbnb's marketing campaign, I feel like it's very effective. Like get an Airbnb of like all their ways where short-term rental is actually better for your stay. And then you go look at Vrbo's campaign, it's like, don't stay at an Airbnb, stay at a Vrbo. And maybe it's and their parent company and being Expedia that they can't go after hotels in the same way. But I'd love to see them trying to come up with ways to market and grow the overall pie as opposed to just trying to steal share.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jamie, go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so I think the standards and consistency is what Vrbo is leaning into, and I think that's good for the industry as a whole. But I think you're right, Jamie. Like the general going after our brother and sister isn't the best route.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if they can kind of pull it all together. But in the meantime, it's just giving us some fun stories to talk about. So I don't hate it. And it's funny because Booking.com is the one that's made the most inroads, I think, from like a market share perspective. And yet they just kind of get left out of this war between Vrbo and Airbnb. But I mean, they're the ones that made that huge push. They're the ones that, I think are really trying to make a pass for Airbnb. So maybe the next billboard should be Booking.com's hotter, cooler twin. Give BDC some marketing as well. Well, Jamie, from your side, is there any other interesting tidbits in the data world that you wanted to bring up? I know you had talked to us a little bit about some data out of Texas, but anything striking you this week?
No, and maybe the one sort of slide I shared that I got excited about in terms of January is really strong. February bookings were actually pretty weak. And we saw actually booking activity decelerate throughout February. Like beginning of February was pretty strong. End of February, it actually went negative. So there's this question as we sort of went into March, like, were we really going to start to see a pullback in bookings? Like, as you guys probably know, like first quarter is sort of make it or break it for our industry in terms of if we get first quarter bookings, like that sets us up for the entire year. It's the most popular quarter to actually book. If Q1's bad, like there's not a whole lot of opportunity to pull out of it. So far though in March, like I'll get week 3 tomorrow, but first 2 weeks turned back positive. So I've been really worried that those first 2 weeks of March were going to stay negative, and then I was going to have to be telling the story of like, guys, we're in trouble. But they averaged about 2.5% growth. That said, like supply is still growing about 4%, so that means occupancy on average was still down in the first quarter for overall bookings. We do have sort of the headwind of Easter. It was in March last year, now in April. So we expected March to be weak. And it's definitely like showing up. So it's hard to know on the booking activity, like how much of that is actually because of Easter. But because I'm feeling good today, hanging out in Barcelona, I'm going to say that probably most of it's because of Easter, and we can expect a really strong April.
So I just have a question about that, because you're saying so like Q1 is like make or break it for the year usually, but so much of the booking activity happens just before summer and like for the summer travel season. So you still like, even with like all of that activity, Q1, because Q1 is a lot of people's slow season. So that kind of surprised me.
Yeah, so Q1 is the quarter with the most bookings, and it's people not only making spring break travel, but also going ahead and booking their summer travel. So summer travel typically gets booked 2 or 3 months ahead of time. So 3 months before that June trip is March.
Does it? You mean you don't get...
Maybe not Miami, but if you're like booking a trip to the Outer Banks, like you're typically doing it like 3 or 4 months in advance. Or if you're going to Hawaii, or if you're going to, and a lot of these markets, like I'd say, like you guys know, my mom operates in Maine. She's got 4 short-term rentals. She starts calling me freaking out in February if she's not booked out for the summer. So yeah.
Some of those markets are that way, but I mean, some of it I think also goes back to your opening diatribe, Jamie, on how much, what the risk of a recession is and where people want to deploy their own personal money right now with not knowing which way the economy is going to go. So yeah, are they going to, buy their flights and hop on a plane to Maui for a week, for spring break or for summer? Maybe they skip that and they go to a drive-to market this year as a result. And, the markets like the Outer Banks, I would also, my intuition says the booking windows are often further out. My family growing up would go to the same island, different houses every time, but the same island, and usually book it while we're at it the year prior. And so, the classic Gen X booking patterns.
Yeah, you can't leave the vacation without booking the next vacation. That's how we do our ski ones. We pick like which mountain we're going to next.
And then that's the other good point to make is we could be in Q2 and just talking about a shortening of the booking window. Like people in Q1 were just scared to book. They waited a little bit longer. They ended up, and we're still far enough out of summer travel season where it's not people choosing to not make a trip yet. It's that they're just maybe pausing the booking of those trips to wait to see what happens, which as you guys all know, like people wait longer. That just means maybe people start cutting rates. They start to freak out a little bit in terms of what is summer actually going to look like, and do I need to start cutting rates to make sure I get my fair share of bookings?
Are travelers getting savvy to the fact that you can get better rates closer to window?
Only if they're listening to Good Morning Hospitality.
I mean, it's a valid point. At some point, people will understand that. Just like, with airlines, there's tricks on days to book and periods of time out to book. With enough data out there, people will understand that, and then also people will understand to book direct. I think that message is slowly percolating, and you can see their information on the profile and go find them directly. That's a market education that takes decades, but it's a real thing that I think the OTAs probably are concerned about at some point, maybe not in the short term, but long term.
Yeah. Well, I think we lots of things to chew on for this week. Jamie always brings a lot of good knowledge. I'm hoping that the optimistic side, that Q2 is it's a late bloomer. We have Easter coming, and that that it's a smooth sailing for people this year. I guess this is kind of like the end of Q1 outlook for the rest of the year. We have our yearly predictions, and it's always fun to see at the end of the year how right or wrong we were. So hopefully
did Jamie see his shadow, or did he not see his shadow?
Exactly.
What's the scenario here?
Are we going to be talking in December super happy or otherwise?
I think we're going to have another year of challenges, and I think next year things will level out and we'll be in a much clearer, better spot. But that's my personal gut. I think we've probably talked about that on the show a bit, and probably individually to each of y'all. But there's a long way to go for a lot of understanding, and but I think the industry, what's happening in the industry, needs to be happening in the industry, and I think there's some big shifts happening. Obviously, with the Casa Go Vacasa thing, trying out different business models is a huge thing. Tech stacks, it's Will and I've had a lot of discussions on tech stacks and the pros and cons there. So I think we got another year or so of figuring it out, plus some M&A, and then I hope it's just up and up from there.
Up and to the right, moving forward.
Love it.
Hopefully.
Well, I hope you guys have a great week. Jamie, how long are you in Barcelona for?
I'm here all week, heading home on Saturday. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Lovely.
Nice.
Well, before we close out, we got to give our amazing partners and sponsors a great shout out at Fido. So if you are a property management company or a host and you are tired of forgetting about trash day and having your guest take out the bin to the curb to make sure that the trash man picks up the trash, then go to getfido.com/GMH and they will give you $50 off or $50 back in return of moving over from a current provider. So go to getfido.com/GMH. And like always, we'll see everybody again next week.